Hello movie barfs and welcome back to the channel. Okay folks, so the MCU and the Fox X-Men universe certainly have their share of marvelous and excellent scenes. Check out the series playlist by Nando V Movies and a string of other channels covering their breakdowns if you don't know what I'm referring to. But while the MCU and the X-Men have had plenty of coverage, there hasn't been much for the DC movies, and I think they could use some too because there are plenty of scenes there that deserve some spotlight. One such scene is one of my favorite openings in all of cinema, and that is the opening for Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. It's one of the best moments for our beloved Caped Crusader on screen, and it served as an inspiration for other Batman media to come. But more importantly, this scene served to reintroduce Batman to a generation used to the campy style of the Adam West era, and oh boy, it sure did succeed in doing so. The scene opens with an aerial shot of Gotham City at night. Here, Burton's cinematography is absolutely on point here. The specific use of colors and lighting really make this fictional comic book city come to life. We've had many versions of Gotham throughout the years, but this here is what many fans consider to be the Gotham City. As the camera pans from left to right in just a few seconds, we see that this isn't a nice place. The setting is dark and depressing, even with the flashing lights from the buildings and the vehicles. It gives the feeling of a rotting and unpleasant and crime-ridden place that deserves a vigilante like Batman to redeem it. There's a certain tension in the air, as if something bad could happen at any moment. You get uneasy just looking at this place. As Jack Napier would later mention, decent people shouldn't live here. A family of a man, woman, and boy are seen nearby the Monarch Theater trying to get a cab. They manage to get one, but then an obnoxious couple just steals it from them, and this to me reinforces the impression that this isn't a friendly city. They're unable to get another cab, and so the family decides to cut into a dark alley. After rebuffing the advances of a hooker in a main street, another sign of the decadent state the city has degenerated to. While walking through what looks like the sketchiest part of town, we start to hear glimpses of Danny Elfman's haunting score. It's eerie and ominous, and it foreshadows something bad is about to happen. At this point, anyone familiar with Batman lore would be getting a sense of deja vu. When I first saw this portion of the film as a kid, I mistakenly thought they were starting off the movie with the murder of the Waynes. After all, the parallels were there. A boy and his parents near the Monarch Theater, entering a dark alley with the possibility of being jumped at any moment. Suddenly, the man gets attacked by a mugger and he falls to the floor unconscious. Another mugger comes by and steals their valuables and they scurry off. As it turns out, the film was just subverting our expectations. We start off thinking this is the Wayne's murder, but it turns out to be something else when they don't get killed. This same technique was used in the ending for Batman Arkham Knight. It has the same concept of a couple leaving a theater only to be jumped by a mugger. Both are a noticeable parallel to the murder of the Waynes in Crime Alley. We then see a shadowy cloaked figure standing on top of a gothic cathedral with gargoyles on its ledges. I'd like to think that the cartoonist CGI here is foreshadowing of how this movie will inspire the animated series a few years later. The film then cuts back to the two muggers sitting on a rooftop and they're counting their loot for the night. Here is where they set up Batman's entrance perfectly. One of the muggers, the more innocent one, starts to mention that he's starting to get uneasy being on a rooftop after hearing of the unfortunate fate of one of his acquaintances due to the work of the Bat. The other mugger scoffs the idea off as just an urban legend, and it is at this point that we see Batman himself slowly descend in the background with Danny Elfman's theme, cape strewn out like a winged creature. The way this entrance is set up is just brilliant. I absolutely love that they started off with Batman as an urban legend before his reveal. Batman is a character who belongs in the shadows, literally and figuratively. There's always an aura of mystery around him. He's still sometimes seen as an urban legend, a bogeyman created to scare criminals out of deterrence. Since Batman isn't a public spotlight here like Superman or Iron Man who appear in public openly, it's very likely that there will be different perspectives of him by the common folk. In Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight, this shot here says it all. Even the police have conflicting and some far-fetched theories of who Batman is. If that's the case for the police, think of the possible opinions of the general public. In Batman, the animated series, we see this portrayed in the episode Legends of the Dark Knight, when a bunch of kids gather together to share their different perspectives on who Batman is. They each have different takes, and each pays homage to the different comic storylines of Batman, from the campy Adam West style to Frank Miller's gritty take. By setting up their disbelief in Batman's existence and chalking him up to just an urban legend, it becomes all the more satisfying when Batman does appear. It's setting us up for the payoff of seeing their expressions of shock and awe when they actually encounter him. After an uneasy moment of silence, we hear the ground rustle as Batman shifts his foot to get their attention. We see this from Batman's point of view, as if we, the audience, were creeping up with him to look down on the sitting muggers. Both of them quickly spin around, alarmed, and they see Batman with his cape strewn out in all its glory. At this point, Danny Elfman's score hits a crescendo, the highest point we've heard so far in the movie. Both muggers freak out and make a run for it, as anyone in their right mind would. Before reaching the door, the more evil mugger decides he's better off trying to kill the Bat after realizing the rumors are true. He fires 4 shots at basically point-blank range at Batman, and they think they've got rid of him, so they continue to make a run for it. But then they notice a shadow moving, and they turn back around to see Batman spreading his cape like a pair of wings again, this time raising them even higher after getting shot at. This portion to me is truly the highlight of this scene. As Batman rises and spreads his cape again, Danny Elfman's score turns into something that resembles that of a horror movie, and it really serves to embellish the scene. It gives you the vibe of a horrifying monster coming back with even greater vengeance and fury. This is classic show, not tell in action here. It's one thing to tell the audience that Batman dresses as a bat to scare criminals. It's another thing to actually see Batman portrayed as this terrifying monster who strikes fear into the hearts of a superstitious and cowardly lot. By now, the 2 muggers are paralyzed with fear, and that remains one of Batman's best intangible weapons, his ability to strike fear which stuns his enemies and keeps innocent bystanders away. They're so stunned that Batman gets a free kick at one of them, sending him flying through the door. The other one tries to flee, but Batman catches him with his grapple hook and reels him in. It's kind of amusing that the mugger who felt guilty and believed in Batman's existence got it worse than the other mugger who robbed the family without any guilt and thought he was just a legend. But since he was the one who doubted the rumors, it was fitting that he got the full experience of his Batman encounter. Batman then holds him over a ledge as he begs him not to kill him, and at this point we hear Batman speak for the first time. The beauty of this interpretation of Batman is how calm, cool, and collected he is. Michael Keaton's not a big guy. In fact, he's probably the smallest of all the Batmans, but he's not screaming and yelling because he's actually in control, and that makes his appearance much more terrifying to criminals than someone screaming through a fake raspy voice. Batman then uses this chance to add to his street cred and says he's not going to kill him, but that he wants him to tell all his friends about him, as if to say he's just getting warmed up in his war on crime. When the mugger asks him, "What are you?" he gives his classic line of only 2 words: "I'm Batman." Who knew that such a simple line like "I'm Batman" could sound so threatening? One of the most iconic phrases in the comic book genre, executed brilliantly in Michael Keaton's performance, and with no tonally inconsistent nice coat follow-up to add unnecessary levity. Also, the mugger's line of "What are you" here is much more effective than its counterpart in Batman Begins, where Carmine Falcone asks a similar question in the backseat of his car before Bale's Batman grabs him. I prefer it here, where that look of absolute trauma on his face says it all. He looks like he's seen a supernatural being and is still reeling from the shock. Batman then throws him back and then glides off the roof like a winged creature to Danny Elfman's score, showing his disappearing act to the audience for the first time. This scene, in my opinion, is the best introduction for Batman so far, and not just for Batman, but for Gotham City too. It's simple, memorable, and straight to the point. It shows the decadence of the city and how it needs a hero like Batman to save it. It pays homage to Batman's origins and subverts your expectations at the same time. It does an excellent job at setting up Batman's character and gives you an idea of what he's like even before you actually see him. It was genius to explore the idea of him as an urban legend first, before we got to witness him in the flesh. From the moment he gently lands on the rooftop behind the two muggers and closes his cape like a pair of wings and then just stands there waiting to be noticed, you know you're in for a show. This introduction so perfectly encapsulates Batman that it must have served as an inspiration for the Batman animated series intro. In both openings, Batman deals with two terrified thugs on a rooftop after a crime and leaves them to the police. Very similar thread to what we have here. In less than 5 minutes of screen time, the film successfully portrays Batman as this terrifying monster who hunts criminals in the dead of night. He's more than a man, he's an urban legend come to life. He's the reason why criminals start to tremble when the sun goes down. Anyone conditioned to the Adam West era who doubts that the character of Batman can be taken seriously would be absolutely sold on the idea now. Whether you like or dislike Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, you can't deny that this movie is still a cornerstone of Batman lore and has helped to bring the character to its modern state today. In my opinion, no other Batman introduction has topped this, and it's why this opening is indeed one decent scene. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.